Hello, my name is Jessie Scott, and I'm a video artist, writer, producer, and currently PhD researcher at RMIT University. Back in the last century, I studied what was then called media arts at RMIT. I practiced for 15 years as an artist before coming back and commencing a practice-based PhD across the School of Art and Design. I've taught as a sessional teacher at RMIT and Deakin over the last 11 years, with occasional one-off lectures at Monash and La Trobe. And my main gig since graduating has been in professional administration. I've worked at DHS, ACME, Melbourne University, and other places in this capacity. I've also freelanced a little bit doing video production, community art, running workshops, and various forms of art and film writing. And I have two kids, aged 8 and 4. I'm a part-time primary carer to them. So I'm just going to give a little overview of my practice. Roughly the first half of my art career, if you want to call it that, was dedicated to collective. On screen, you can see a couple of images from projects I did with Tape Projects, an audiovisual art collective that I formed with other RMIT grads, which was dedicated to addressing the lack of support we perceived in the artist-run initiative space for media art, or what used to be called new media art. We were video artists, animators, sound artists, and we produced gigs, talks, publications, installations, and live art performances, always working in close collaboration with other artists, presenters, and audiences. These are some of the publications Tape Projects released. On the left-hand side is one of the 4 DVD compilations of video art, sound, and animation that we released. And on the right is a locked groove record that came with 60 short looping soundtracks and a collection of 30 flipbooks with individual animation and video art pieces on them. You could kind of mix and match them to the short soundtracks. With each of these publications, we would have a launch event, which involved screening of the works on the DVDs, live performances of various kinds, installations, and sort of just a party. In this way, there was always a blurred line between artist, artwork, and audience. And these publications and their launches were very much a generative tool for building our audience and networks. And I'll come back to these later. I just wanted to mention those specifically. Around 2011, Eugenia Lin, a fellow member of Tape Projects, and I started working on a project that eventually became the Channel's Video Art Festival. This was a biennial video art festival that was kind of a medium-specific extension of the Tape Projects model. So we were trying to represent video art in a more medium-specific way than we found in white cube art spaces, and also to be more expansive in our definition of video art. So everything from performance video to screen-based to installation and a whole range of networked and XR manifestations of video were included in that definition. Around the same time as we were developing Channels Festival, I did a residency at the Barclay Arts Centre in Footscray, which was a small community art centre attached to a social housing development and Lentil as Anything, if anyone knows it. I was working with community members to produce an exhibition of street photography. And in the process of doing this, I started documenting the rapidly gentrifying sites around Footscray myself that I was seeing every week. This was really the beginning of my own solo practice, and the work that I produced, called Olympic Donuts, led me to start thinking about the northwest suburbs where I grew up and what was happening to the streetscape as they underwent this rapid set of economic and social shifts. On screen, you can see a still from that work, which sort of merges an image of Olympic Donuts, the little donut van that used to be next to Footscray Station, and the entrance to Forges of Footscray, the great Western Suburbs department store. So the next year, 2012, I had my first solo show at Screen Space. Death Watch was a 3-channel video installation, which was kind of like a video vigil of this site on screen, the old Moonee Ponds Market, which had been sold, semi-demolished, and then sat as an open wound in the middle of the community for 15 years in a kind of Kafkaesque planning quagmire. I was fascinated by the fact that this wonderful community asset that I had been, had gone to as a kid every week with my family had been lost, and no one appeared to be able to do anything about it. And also that so much evidence of the site remained there, whole tiled butcher's floors and severed electrical wires, sort of popping out of pipes. But people had stopped seeing it, and that really started me thinking about the idea of place. What makes place? Is it buildings or is it people? And what breaks it? From there, I turned my attention to my own neighbourhood and started my project, the Coburg Plan, documenting sites of vernacular architecture around Coburg, where I now live and have for the last 14 years. This turned into a 6-year project that spanned photography, video, an Instagram account, and eventually a self published book of photographs and writing about all of these kinds of issues that had been circulating in my practice. So, the built environment, gentrification, densification, urban planning, the politics of housing, social history, and more. So, even before the PhD, there really started to be a research bent to my work. This is the book. And self publishing a book was a really interesting turning point for me, as it reminded me of the earlier forays in self publishing and distributable art that I'd been involved with tape projects. It was a really satisfying process to make something that was relatively accessible and affordable, and then that was out there in people's homes, in shops, and in libraries. As a gallery based artist, I'd never had that sense of a lasting legacy for my work because installation is necessarily kind of fleeting, nor that sense of it being tangible to an audience. So I really enjoyed that, and it really put my practice on a totally different trajectory. So not long after that, in 2018, after the birth of my second daughter, I commenced a PhD at RMIT in art. My project is about video lending libraries, mostly commercial video shops, but also some institutional lending libraries, and how artists use them. This project began as just another installation I was working on over many years, but at some point it felt big enough to turn into a research project. This is an overview of the whole project on screen, but I really just wanted to mention some of um, the outcomes. This project has a strong oral history element, and some of the main outcomes include a feature-length documentary, a pop-up video art lending library, and an artist game, both of which I'll talk about later in more detail. A fair question at this point might be, why video shops? As part of the Coburg plan, I had photographed a few video shops over the years, and I'd had the experience of my favourite one closing down in that time too. I guess as a child of the 1980s, I had really strong memories and associations with the video shop. For me, they were absolutely an entry point and a very accessible one into film and art culture. And as I became interested in making art about this, a question that arose for me was, perhaps this was true for other artists too. The more artists I spoke to, the more this emerged as a touchstone narrative. That as kids or young teens, they went to the video shop and were exposed to cinema and culture they hadn't anticipated encountering. As my research progressed and I built up a more detailed picture of the video shop as a historical and social phenomenon, some aspects that were significant to how they operated emerged. The fact that they were somewhere between the order of a library and the idiosyncratic chaos and browsability of a shop meant that a lot of unanticipated discovery happened inside them. That they ended up being inadvertent archives, allowing people to see across time with film, which non experts had not been able to do before because cinema distribution was very linear and locked into cycles, which once a film was out of, it was gone. That they were rich in material culture. Posters, cover art, merchandising displays, they were spaces of optic and haptic stimulation. And the fact that they were cultural and social spaces. So, where people came to converse with other aficionados and enthusiasts about film, where taste was developed and disseminated, and knowledge was expanded and produced. And also that they were democratic spaces. The barriers to entry were very low and the range was diverse. Most chain stores in the suburbs had some kind of bleeding edge in the form of an art house or world movie section, and even the most indie art house video shop had to have the latest new release blockbusters in stock to make it work financially. So high and low mixed and provided lots of entry points for people of different backgrounds and understandings of film. I believe this stimulated an interest in art through the 80s and 90s in film and popular culture and gave artists access to new languages, techniques, and ways of seeing things that they hadn't had access to before. I'm really interested in how this quite contained episode in the history of film distribution produced this very rich, accessible moment for film culture and how that spilled out into art practice. For example, the work of Sydney-born artist Soda Jerk, who have often credited their earliest work, such as Hollywood Burn, of which there are some stills on the screen right now, to the collection of the classic Bondi Junction video shop, Dr. Watt. For them, the idiosyncratic logic of the video shop helped order the logic of their clips-based works. In terms of the works that I've produced as part of this project, I'm going to talk about two of them that I think explore different aspects of this video shop effect. Playfulness and performativity has a huge role in how film knowledges are maintained, and my game video shop algorithm, which is on screen now, taps into that playfulness. It's a party game, basically, that can be played between 4 to 8 people and involves a deck of cards, a large game board or sheet of paper, textures, and stickers. Video shop algorithm revives the playful performance of film memory and knowledge that once was a common experience in video shops, allowing players to collaboratively construct a mind map of their shared knowledge of film, each title added to the board and connected to others via different conversational constraints. For example, if you like that, you might also like this. The players are rewarded for increasing the number and density of connections on the map, externalizing and building on each individual's memories and knowledge, using only VHS and DVD cases as prompts with no recourse to online databases. So as a group, you assemble this little library of film covers and then you take it in turns to try to connect them to each other, as well as adding in other titles. Visual web that is literally drawn through this process is a metaphor for the web of memory that each and every video shop held in its own community, spinning out from the objects themselves, facilitating endless connections. Here's just some documentation of the kinds of diagrams that result from playing the game. They're really interesting documents that can be read post-fact. The game is playable online and can be downloaded as a print and play. But I've also been getting it out into shops such as Gameology, bookstores such as the Sun Bookshop, Brunswick Bound, and the Acme Gift Store. Again, it's given me great satisfaction to have my work available in these contexts, not shown in a gallery for a couple of weeks, never to be seen again. Another thing that I've been really interested in looking at in this project is the idea that you might be able to apply some of the lessons of the video shop to video art. Video art has always sat awkwardly in the art archive, university libraries, museum access collections, etc. It's difficult to find if you don't know it exists. It often comes in blank or nondescript institutional covers. And in this digital age, where collections and libraries are increasingly moving audiovisual content to streaming services like Canopy and dumping their VHS and DVD collections, it sometimes just doesn't exist at all, is absent where it might once have been found. Moreover, there's a lack of index of video art practice in Australia. There are projects like Monash's Video Art Archive and the UNSW website Scanlines, but these have mostly come out of a research context, and when the funding runs out, so does the updating and promoting of them. On screen is a classic example of this. The landing page of the Australian Video Art Archive, metaphorically expressing where that collection currently sits in public consciousness. Everyone and everything is on the internet. It's true, there's a lot of video art on the internet, but how do you find it if you don't know where to start? The internet is a wonderfully accessible means of distribution, but a terribly uneven mode of access. The idea that you have to know what you're looking for when you go looking for it. This is common to both the internet at large and the archives or collections where video art is often held. The result is that if you want to see video art, it's very hard now to see it in an organized, indexed way, where it is in the context and continuum with other work, but also dynamic and responsive to what is current and vibrant in the practice. It's usually one or the other. But these are features that lending libraries do really well, and the opportunity to stumble across it, which were always low, are also now almost non-existent, which is where my project Video Art Video Shop comes in. It's basically my experiment with giving video art the video shop treatment. Knowing what a powerful and accessible model of distribution video shop culture and discovery in film, I wondered if it could have the same effect with video art. Basically, Video Art Video Shop, I'll just move my head out of the way so you can see my friend Laura's head. Basically, Video Art Video Shop is my pop-up library that collects the unwanted, unloved and unseen video art and experimental film projects of artists and amateurs that are collecting dust on shelves and in personal archives. As the head librarian, I lovingly ingest these items into my temporary library, symbolically reinstating them into the art historical archive before offering them to the public for redistribution. Visitors to the library can browse the collection and even sign up and take a video home. In exchange, I only ask that they allow me to follow up in 1 year's time to find out what they did with their loan. Did it simply sit on another shelf gathering other dust? Was it reused or remixed into a new artwork? Was it screened and shared with others? Or did something more unlikely become of it? These insights and data from across the project will be collated into a zine that will be published at the end of the project in 2023, mapping the redistribution of these video artworks. I've wheeled my trolley out to various locations around Melbourne this year, including Acme X, 260, test sites at Queen Victoria Market, RMIT, and the Rowden White Library at the University of Melbourne. And each time it's been a different experience with lots of really interesting conversations and engagement. In creating this lending library of this video shop of video art, I wanted to combine some of the elements of the institutional, the sense of unity, utility, authority, and organisation of culture, with those of the video shop, the tactility, browsability, and sense of discovery. On the left here is an example of a VHS tape that used to be in the RMIT library. I don't bother showing the back cover because this is the sum total of the information that's on it. This is not really a browsable object. This is an artifact that presumes former awareness or knowledge of its contents, in fact. On the right hand, however, is a classic VHS that would be found in a video shop. It has compelling and dramatic artwork, attention-grabbing graphic design using fonts that telegraph information about genre, and on the back cover there's a lot more information. A précis of the film, some highlight screenshots, and a bunch of data, running time, year, production company, rating. Usually there's key personnel listed as well. There's a lot going on and it's pretty focused on getting your attention, even if it slightly misrepresents the film a little bit, but it is rich with content. Now, this is a tape that I picked up at a secondhand store, and I found it really interesting and unusual, and it ended up being the model I used for my cover template. It's a copy of Electric Blue, not a children's film, from a children's hospital video lending library. There were a couple of things about this that I felt made it a great model for the project. It's a perfect combination of that sense of unity and authority that an institutional library format gives, with the more content-rich browsability you would find with a commercial video shop. I also loved that it was so handmade and personalised, such a tactile object. I don't know if you can tell from these images, but there's basically cut and pasted elements from the original cover of this tape into their template. So this is what I came up with. I'll move my head again. um, my extremely lo-fi video art video shop cover, where I stole the same basic template and added in my logo and strapline, and then I print out the text and images for each artwork, cut them out and glue them onto each cover individually. In doing this, I'm trying to strike a balance between offering a sort of institutional context or framework for these artworks, but also something more tantalizing and stimulating in the form of text and images that actually give a sense of the work, that tries to sell it to you a little bit. And it's this personalization, this tactility, that has emerged as really important in the project. So the excessive handling that is necessitated by it has a lot of implications. I feel like in all forms of cultural distribution, whether it be libraries or video shops, streaming, there's been this shift away from handling objects towards frictionless processes, online databases, automation, and self-service. In this project, I've deliberately leaned into the tactile and the handling. So although it may seem cumbersome and inefficient, there are so many opportunities in each of those touch points for conversations, connections, and new knowledge to emerge. This is an example of the kind of workflow of what happens with my library. When I receive a new submission, I watch the work and write a précis. I take a screenshot, I print out and assemble a cover for it. I cut out a foam insert for it if it's a USB. I enter it into my database. I place it into the tub. On the day of a pop-up, I merchandise the stock on the shelves, arranging them in loose genres or maybe for visual appeal. I talk to patrons. They browse through the stock, they ask questions. I look through the covers. I pick up the cases, I look them over, I read the précis, and I make a decision about what to recommend. Then they pick it up, they hold it, weigh it, and consider the object before making a decision. There's lots of conversation that happens in this process. They fill in a form. I put a reminder slip in the cover of their loan, and then they take it home. I transcribe the information from the form into another database and make a reminder for myself in my Google Calendar to follow up with each person a week before their loan is due in 2023. Now, a lot of this might sound like double dealing, but what I've found is that it is in fact through all this excessive handling that I get to know my collection really well. I have seen and summarized every work, chosen an image to promote it, placed it on the shelf. I am the shepherd of these artworks and their primary advocate in the world. So, what, if anything, emerges from all these touch points? What have been the outcomes of putting video art in the video shop? What I've discovered is that very much indeed emerges. On screen are some of the curatorial projects I've done over the course of 2022, in which I've actively programmed the works of artists who submitted to the library, many of whom were unknown to me before. Like with Tape Project's publications and their launch events, which were programmed from open calls, there is a real sense with this library that it is generative, that other events, screenings, projects, connections, and community falls out of it simply because of the way a lending library works. And the lines between audience, artwork, and artists are also very much blurred in a way that is dynamic and shifting with each outing of the public library. Sorry, with each public outing of the library. Finally, my other major project as part of the PhD is a feature-length documentary, as I mentioned. I thought I'd just end with this short clip from the artist Diego Ramirez, who I interviewed for the film, where he talks about how the video shop factored into his own practice. Thank you so much for listening. And also, although this is pre-recorded, through the magic of television, I will be around in person afterwards to answer any questions.
Well, I really miss video shops because my research process is basically just sinking in and immersing in the thing that I'm interested in. So with video shops, it was just a matter of going to an aisle and just blasting through the movies and just going like, you know, every week and just grabbing 5 DVDs and just watching them. But I mean, I feel like that logic of organizing things cinematically and exhausting the movies that exist within that category is like a video shop logic.